Okay, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off because I want to make sure that we maximize our time with our amazing speaker for the day. I want to start off just by saying good afternoon and thank you most wholeheartedly, all of you, for joining us today in this, the first of our job search seminar series, or first of our job search seminars in the Georgetown Rockefeller Pivot with Purpose Job Search Seminar Series. I am Laura Sheehan, the Associate Director of the School of Foreign Service Career Center at Georgetown University. Wanted to throw out just a couple of administrative points before we get this great event started. If you have questions, because I know you will, please be sure to put them in the Q&A section down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. The chat is open for everybody to use and to actively participate in this discussion, but in order for any of your questions to be seen and recorded and to make sure that we are able to present them to Jenny at the end of her great presentation, please be sure to put them in the Q&A instead of in the chat. Okay, so Laura Sheehan, again, as I said, the Associate Director for the Career Center at the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University. I have had the distinct honor and privilege of helping to design this portion of the programming, which is intended to meet a need that this amazing community has articulated, a need for truly tactical job search tips and tools. Now, the first step in any effective, efficient job search is, of course, defining your next target. So with that essential foundation in mind, this first session is being led by the visionary author and strategist, Jenny Blake. Jenny is an award-winning author, international keynote speaker, podcaster, and career strategist based in New York City. A former career development manager at Google, Jenny co-created the Google Career Guru coaching program. That's a mouthful. She has also authored 3 influential books: Life After College, which is in 2011, Pivot, The Only Move That Matters Is Your Next One. That's the focus of today, published in 2016, and a winner of the Axiom Best Business Book Award. And her most recent book, Free Time, Lose the Busy Work, Love Your Business, published in 2022. Jenny is also the voice behind 2 popular podcasts, Pivot with Jenny Blake and Free Time, which together have earned over 2 million downloads. Her work centers on helping individuals and organizations navigate change, especially during career pivots, with clarity, confidence, and creativity. She champions the message that meaningful transition and transformation can be intentional, supported, and profound. And that is exactly why we asked Jenny, and we are so glad that she is here with us today. So please join me in welcoming Jenny Blake to share her insights on how to set your sights on a new path and envision your next steps. Jenny, microphone is off to you.
Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Happy start to summer here in New York. We've got gorgeous 100-degree humidity, but I'm really honored to be here. And I really loved if any of you were able to attend the kickoff last week with Dr. Raj Shah. I just want to echo his remarks and start by saying thank you. All of you have dedicated your lives and careers to service in some way, and you don't deserve what happened earlier this year. And yet, here we all are. You're the one that has to now navigate the fallout of it. And so I'm really delighted to see this incredible series that the Georgetown team has put together with the help of Rockefeller Foundation, and to know that even if you're a little tired from the last few months, or you've really been in a phase of grieving and processing, maybe you haven't even been as action oriented, or you've been sort of scanning around for what to do next without a plan, I'm really delighted that we get to spend this time here together to ground a little bit. And this session will be interactive. I want to help you take a step back and look at your career and work on your career because you have this moment of pause. Again, this is a situation where you've all gotten pivoted after, shall we say, 5 years that were already tumultuous enough since the onset of the pandemic. But this is a chance to step back, reflect, pause, recalibrate, and reimagine what's possible. So today we'll be giving you a framework on how to think about mapping what's next. And then in later sessions, even on Thursday, we'll talk about some ways to structure your time, and then you'll have other sessions that are some of the really practical nitty gritty. So this one, I want you to feel free to dream a little bit. even if you feel a little weary from that. Although it's a slightly different situation, when I remember in early March, as so many of us have a pandemic story of our own, but in early March, I got a phone call. It was the first week of March, and two things happened that day. One, I was set to speak at a Women at Google event the following week, and they called and said, "We're going to cancel." And my stomach dropped because as soon as they said they were canceling this event, I knew that every other speaking event that I had would follow. And I've been self employed now for 14 years, but a large part of my income came from speaking and licensing. I also had a licensing contract that was supposed to be signed by the end of day, March 6th. And the team said it was supposed to be signed at the end of January. It had gone through legal and procurement. And bottom line, by the end of this day, the Google event had been canceled and they didn't sign the contract. And I had this sick feeling that this was only the beginning. Sure enough, over the next 2 weeks, all of my events were canceled through the rest of the year. And the contract that never ended up getting signed, wiping away 80% of my income in 2 weeks. And I remember thinking that in all the years of self employment, at that point, it had been almost 10 years, almost a decade. It was worse than my worst fears. It was events I couldn't have predicted, just like you, couldn't have planned it, couldn't have predicted it. And now here I was stuck having to kind of solve this, where I've not only did I lose one big client or a small handful, but all events 2 years out into the future. That's what Nassim Taleb calls a black swan event, which he says are, by definition, high profile, hard to predict, and rare events that go beyond the realm of normal expectations. So I know that you've all already been pivoting the last few years. And for a lot of us, when the pandemic first hit, I know so many of you are working in the field. You're working for really important organizations where you might have had to do more with less. You might have gotten pivoted in those few years. You might have had small kids at home. Maybe you were caring for an ailing family member. Our surge capacity to meet that challenge and meet that crisis, you've already done a huge exertion. And now here we are in 2025, and it feels like there's more. And now what? And now, again, you're having to face this huge question of what's next, not of your choosing, but of your what is now hopefully going to be an opportunity. I loved what Dr. Shaw said, how, you really wouldn't necessarily choose this, and yet times of crisis can be a moment to step back and recalibrate and reimagine. And you're not alone in doing that. You have so many peers who are in the same boat. And I just, again, knowing that the scaffolding of this summer program through Georgetown is here to support you. So in my case, um, there's always when this crisis hits, when these two things kind of wiped out my income, but also how I was going to earn a living for the next few years, it really is a chance to say, okay, how can I reconnect with the things that I uniquely do? So your highest and best contribution. And that's what we're going to get into with the pivot method. So let me just grab my slides. Okay, give me just one moment. Here we go. Okay, hopefully you can see those. About a year after the pandemic hit, I was walking with Ryder, my dog, in the park, and I came across this art installation. The artist is Zach Landsberg. It's called Reclining Liberty. And just to give you a sense of scale, it's 25 feet long, so it's enormous. Ryder is a 100-pound German Shepherd, and this is how small he looks in comparison. And I remember feeling so seen that the artist statement, when I looked it up, he said that he created this for a couple reasons. One, he wanted to show almost like the reclining Buddha. What would it look like if Lady Liberty were in repose? But the other part of the message was a sense of exhaustion. And this was in 2021 that this was in Morningside Park in New York City. And it seems still so apt now, 4 years later, where there's so many ways you could read into this statue and the message of seeing Lady Liberty. We're used to her standing tall and proud in the Hudson River. But here, kind of reclined or tired or exhausted or relaxed or taking a different approach. And I don't know about you, but there is just something about this that I felt seen. I felt comforted in a way that we are all struggling right now to make new meaning and do what we can and take action and not lose hope and try to take those small next steps toward the future that we want to create, even when it feels like everything is upside down. One of my favorite quotes is Heraclitus: "No person ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and they're not the same person." You all already know this from the work that you've been doing with USAID and partner organizations, where the conditions are always changing. So you are all already pivot pros. Like I said, you've already been pivoting continuously the last 5 years, if not your entire career. Now, what's a little tricky is that for many of you, if you're not going to launch and do your own thing, we'll talk a little bit about that if you choose to go into self-employment on Thursday. Either way, how to structure your time while you're in between this and your next move. But you're also now, many of you will be searching for new opportunities in an environment like this, where you're never stepping in the same river twice. You wake up every day and you're different, or the conditions have changed or shifted yet again, or the organizations that you're speaking with, the companies you're interviewing with, the change is constant. When I was working on Pivot almost a decade ago, when I started on the book, I adopted the mantra: if change is the only constant, then let's get better at it. Because I saw, even at Google, even when people felt like they had reached their dream job and their dream career, they were still hitting plateaus and they were still running up against, well, now what? You're also searching in a VUCA environment. So it's just to acknowledge that if you're struggling to gain traction, that's normal. That's expected. Many of you probably already know the term VUCA, but it stands for volatility, complexity, uncertainty, and ambiguity. So know that as you're searching, as you're even creating opportunities that may not exist yet, which I know that many of you are going to do, and you won't see them. You can't even see them yet. I've seen for so many pivoters over the last decade where they do the work, they take one small step and one small step after that, and then serendipity starts playing a role and kind of meeting you halfway. But acknowledging that there is not a linear path from here. For many of you, you're grieving the loss of what felt like a really solid career track or a job that you had already invested so much in. And now we've sort of shaken the snow globe of the world, or it's been shaken for you. And now you're needing to map what's next in a context that is volatile and complex and uncertain. So, how do we go about that? And that's really what we're going to focus on today, because you all will have a different threshold for risk. Now, things feel kind of risky and uncertain and unstable right now anyway. So if you look at this diagram, sometimes when you're just coasting, you're either in your comfort zone or even a stagnation zone, maybe hitting a career plateau, feeling a little bored, stuck, or stagnant. Comfort zone is where work's fine. You don't really even think too much about it. Sometimes we need work to be in a comfort zone while we're taking care of family emergencies or things happening in our personal life or exciting changes personally. The optimal range for change and even for navigating this pivot are looking for next steps and small projects that are in your stretch zone, where they feel edgy and exciting, but not overly intimidating to the point of inaction. The panic zone is where you feel so stressed and so pressured and so constricted that you're almost frozen. You don't take action at all. You start to feel hopeless. And again, for a lot of, like, so many of you, where you got pivoted, where you just got the news unceremoniously in a way you didn't deserve, might have probably, catapulted you into a panic zone for some amount of time. And it's okay if you're still there. And maybe panic's not the right word. Again, it could be grief zone. It could be sometimes after working in a really intense job, whether you leave by choice or by circumstance, there's also a decompression period where your body is just recovering and processing all the change. Again, not just of this year, but of the last several years. So the key, and what I'd love for you to think about as we go through this session and through the summer series, is how can you continue dialing your risk threshold to where any one next step feels doable? Yes, it's edgy, it's exciting. You might have to muster up some courage to reach out to somebody, but you're not placing so much pressure on yourself that it feels impossible. And sometimes our mind thinks, well, I should have figured it out by now. So our mind has an idea about the timeline that the reality just doesn't bear out. So sometimes there's a Buddhist phrase called the second arrow. It's like something happens, and then we throw the second arrow when we tell stories about that. Like, I'm not doing this correctly. Or let's say you're interviewing and you're not hearing back. Job searching is notoriously opaque process. To no fault of your own, you're not hearing back. It's so easy to throw the second arrow. Something's wrong with me. I'm doing this wrong. This is hopeless. I'm never going to figure this out. So I just want to encourage you, when you can, notice the extra layer of stories and try to come back to, okay, what one or two next steps would put me in my stretch zone to where I'm taking action, but they're not so overwhelming, or I'm not expecting myself to solve the pivot up front. And I can tell you that that's a mistake that a lot of pivoters make, is thinking that there's some capital A answer and that you need to find the capital A answer until until you have that in your mind, you don't move forward. And it actually works in the opposite way. So I'll tell you a little more about how it works. But first, you've probably all heard the term high net worth, people who've accumulated a lot of financial resources. Just want to highlight that all of you, especially if you're here at this session, either watching live or watching back on the recording, I would consider you high net growth, where you're not just asking, what am I earning, but what am I learning? How am I growing? And when those needs are being met, you also want to know, how am I making an impact? And you've all come from such incredible jobs and careers where you are learning and growing and making an impact. And so I would also encourage you, of course, you have financial needs during this time. Career change can be so terrifying because it directly feels like it's threatening our most fundamental needs on Maslow's hierarchy: food, clothing, and shelter, where there is going to come a point in your pivot runway where you can see on the horizon, you might run out of cash if you don't solve this by X date. Or maybe you're already running low, you're already dipping into savings. And even as you work to solve the financial puzzle pieces, stay connected to how you're most excited to grow. How are you already growing this year? How has this year already called you forth? And what kind of impact can you make, large and small? I loved, even during the kickoff, many people were asking about, what do you do with this gap of time on a resume? And that people have started sharing stories of volunteering, just making a small impact where they can, and jumping into projects where they learn and grow and make connections and make an impact, even if that isn't the permanent solution and it hasn't fully solved the financial piece, that it's kind of an interim pivot. So the pivot as a mindset is knowing that there is no there. It's a continuous process, and the better you get at it, the more fluid it can become. And we're going to talk about a four-stage method to help you map what's next. So the way I define a pivot, in the startup context, it's often plan B. Something has failed and now you need to pivot. But in career, it's so much more often, especially if you're high net growth, it's often a result of things you've done well. And so sometimes when people are at a pivot point, it's easy to focus on what you lack, or you look at others and you have a sense of compare and despair, or someone else already has their next thing figured out. The best, strongest pivots are often in a new related direction to what you were already previously doing, but they start by doubling down on your strengths and what's already working. And you all have different strengths that you bring to this process. So we're going to excavate some of those when we dig into the reflection section. The four stages, if you think like a basketball player, they have one foot planted and then they scan for passing options around the court. So the plant foot, that's your foundation. And it can be, in times of crisis, almost tempting to skip over this stage because you go, okay, I've gotten pivoted. Now what's out there? What's next? What's out there? Who can I talk to? But the plant stage is really about asking two questions first. What's working and what does success look like? Then the scan stage, what's out there? And pilot, what can I try? So this whole pivot process boils down to one question, really. What can I try? And the first three, plant and scan, what's working, what does success look like, what's out there, those are going to help you get to some resonant pilots or experiments that take the pressure off of any one next move while you wait to see which of your pilots take on a momentum of their own. So I'd love for you to reflect. You've already been pivoting your whole career. You already know how to do this. I'm giving you some language and a refresh on something you've already done. So I would love for you to share in the chat. Reverse engineer one of your earlier pivots. And maybe you're attending this and you already have an interim pivot where you've already got something going on. But even earlier in your career, can you think of a time? Because this is also going to help hone in on one of your superpowers. We all have different ones that you pivoted from opportunity A to opportunity B by doubling down on C. And I'll give you an example. When I was a junior in college at UCLA, one of my political science professors asked me, she said, I have this startup company. I'm starting it with a Stanford professor. Any chance you want to come be an intern? So I had already been her research assistant, and that was leveraging the relationship. So I said yes. I became the first employee at the startup company. I was there as it grew from 1 to 30 people. And when I hit a plateau there, I did start looking outside because it was clear that my role, there was really no room for it to expand inside. One of my many hats was managing our Google AdWords accounts. I ended up applying for a job to be an AdWords product trainer at Google. I got the job and pivoted. So I pivoted from the AdWords client, but that was the axis. That was the plant foot, was that Google AdWords, that Google connection, pivoting from the client side over to training and development. And then from AdWords product trainer, when I got tired of talking about the same product features and teaching every day, then I pivoted within Google from the product training team over to the career development team, where I did some of the work I'm proudest of, even though I was wondering at that plateau moment, do I need to leave altogether? So I've shared just a couple examples I would love to hear. Let's see which ones are coming through. So Maka says, I pivoted from academia to international development by doubling down on making my research applied. Ooh, amazing. Uh, Michaela, I pivoted from elementary education to international development by doubling down on what I wanted to learn. Amazing. There's that growth piece and my interest in global citizenship. Cool. Thanks, everybody. Lindsay says, in 2020, I pivoted from Peace Corps international development to local national policy by doubling down on my interest in writing. Amazing. Ashley pivoted out of academia 4 years ago, did an inventory of my transferable skills, talked to people who had moved from academia to other fields, and then applied to government jobs. So double down on regional experience and research. This is so cool because some of you are pivoting on people and connections, relationships you have. Some of you have deep well of research that you're able to leverage into different arenas. Let's see. Wendy pivoted from teaching Peace Corps volunteers to international development. Oh, from consulting to staff. Suzanne pivoted from domestic education to international by doubling down on her knowledge of disability inclusion and how it could be implemented internationally. That's so interesting too. I mean, many of you are experiencing location pivots where you're, again, not necessarily of your choosing, but there's this moment where all of a sudden the location is up in the air. Maybe even the work stays similar, but it moves to a different region, country, state. Let's see, Melinda pivoted to USAID from Homeland Security Policy by joining USAID as a contractor, and then they eventually created a position for you. I'll read just a couple more. These are great. Keep them coming, everybody, because again, it's also highlighting your unique superpowers that you've already leaned on in the past. Josh pivoted from international health to working for state government by networking and linking relationship between global health and domestic health. I'm also seeing a lot of really innovative problem solving. A lot of you are seeing a problem that needs to be solved, matching your expertise to it, and then moving and sort of almost in a lot of these examples, probably even creating your own role based on the solution. These are great. Okay, keep them coming. Let's keep moving. But these are really helpful, even as we keep moving in the session, to see each other's examples. Let's dive into the pivot method now. And this is where you really get a chance to reflect, and then we'll open it up for questions at the end. So the plant stage, another metaphor, I go crazy for metaphors. So we have the basketball player, but the other one I like is thinking about Google Maps. You are here. This is that blue, you are here, current location, spinning dot. And you generally want to end up here. Now, some of you may feel like I had a vision for my career or for what's next, and now everything's up for grabs and I don't know anymore. Or you might feel discouraged or you can't see the vision that you had maybe even a year ago. So for today, I just want to encourage you, think about your vision even by the end of this year, by the end of 2025. You don't have to know the specifics. If you want, you can do 1 year from now, so summer 2026. The the pivot point, the first part of the plant stage, what was working best? Like, what were you most excited about? I'll give you some prompts in a minute, but this is really about understanding and extracting. Okay, it's probably whatever you were doing, there were aspects that you loved and aspects you could have done without. So we're going to hone in on your strengths, what you loved, and vision is even broad strokes. What would success look like now from this new vantage point and from the reflection you've already been doing the first half of this year? One thing I want to highlight when it comes to strengths for the plant stage is we often think of strengths as competencies, skills, things that people have praised you for, you were recognized for, maybe they came in handy at your job. But there's also areas that energize you. These are intrinsic motivators. These are things that have you leaping out of bed. And the intersection of the two, these are your true strengths. So, a way you could even shortcut this is to call them energy strengths or energizers. And I really want you to spend time with this because sometimes when pivoting, you might think, oh, I've done all that personality assessment stuff. I've done it in the past. I already know. But you change and grow, just like the Heraclitus quote. You are evolving every day. And maybe this time, this kind of forced pause, you can also look and see, has your energy shifted? Has the work that brings you alive, has it shifted? What does energize you most? So let me set a timer. Take 2 minutes. If you can, get out a pen and paper. It's even better than typing, just so your hand can be free. And try to write down as much as you possibly can in the next 2 minutes for just the first part of the plant stage. And you could think about this in your previous role. You could even think about it in your search process thus far if you haven't yet landed on the next thing. If you are already in a new role, you can certainly take inventory. What is working right now? Because this is what's going to fuel the tank. What energizes you the most, personally and professionally? They both have you in common. When you look at your calendar for the upcoming week, what do you get most excited to see on there? Thinking about projects that you've worked on in the past. Think about what projects energize you and what was it about them that really lit you up? What do you tend to be the go-to person for? So many of you might be world-renowned experts. You might have deep research that's kind of almost academic research or professional research you've done. But it could also be what friends and family come to you for. What do people call you for advice about most often? When you are working in a team, what do you tend to be the go-to person for? Let's say when it comes to getting thank you notes, what do you hear most often? What are some of the patterns? What did you love doing most as a kid? So when you were old enough to invent make-believe games, what kinds of games did you play? What kinds of crafts or hobbies did you like doing? What little side projects? I like to think about Maybe when you were 6 to 10 years old? What kind of extracurriculars when you were then in middle school? What about in high school? And not the stuff that you did because you knew would help you get into college or something. The ones that really brought you joy. My friend Neil Pasrica calls it the Saturday morning test. What would you do on Saturday morning when you feel like your time is your own, you don't feel guilt or pressure to do anything for anyone else? And then part two, try to write now for 2 minutes. I'm going to set the timer again. What does success look like 1 year from now? And I know you might not know the location, you might not know the job title, you might not know the organization, but start to imagine broad strokes. What would you be so proud to have happening in your life and work a year from now, where you could look back and say, man, what a ringer 2025 was, but I'm so proud of where it led me. Going back to, of course, you can think about financial. So, what do you need? Maybe there's a certain amount of monthly net that you need to hit. Um, or by the end of the year, you need to have a job that pays at least X. And I like to think about three numbers: minimum needed to pay the bills, nice to have, and jump out of bed with glee when we're talking about the finances. And you can also think about growth. How would you be most excited to grow in the year ahead? What new skills might you want to learn? How could this time provide an opportunity for you to expand into new areas? And then looking at that impact piece, what kind of impact would you be proud to make a year from now? Imagine you would win an award or receive a glowing thank you note. What would the person say? And even just picturing what kind of environment lights you up. What kinds of people do you want to be surrounded by? That's time. So I'm going to give you 30 more seconds. I find that at this stage, a lot of people go with what's safe. They're in that comfort zone because it kind of feels scary to even dream, especially with how much uncertainty there is in the broader market. But I want to encourage you. You don't have to share this part with anybody. You don't have to say it out loud, but at least just turn the volume down on the inner critic that says, "Who do you think you are? That's not possible. You're too young, you're too old, you're too inexperienced, too experienced." 30 more seconds. What would really stretch you? Wild success a year from now. I'm talking you're ecstatic if this or these few things could transpire. Okay. Now, sometimes when I'm working with coaching clients, we'll spend a month or more on this stage, the plant stage alone. So we're just scratching the surface. But I will tell you, I know I said it earlier, this is the stage that I notice people are most likely to skip. They just think it's too abstract, it's too esoteric. And yet, the plant stage is going to be the accelerator for all the searching and scanning that you do that follows. So, really spend time with this. Share in the resources. I have an ideal day Mad Lib that can also help you vision. But the clearer you are on your strengths, your energizers, and your vision, it will be amazing how that starts to direct your actions in a more funneled way so you don't feel like you're just throwing spaghetti against the wall. Once you're grounded in those two things, so going back to the Google Maps analogy, you have your current location and you kind of know a general sense of where you want to end up. It does not have to be super specific. Now you can start scanning for three things based on the plant stage: people, skills, and projects. So now in the Google Maps equivalent, this is starting to look for transportation options. Okay, so I live uptown and I'm trying to get to the Statue of Liberty. Great. How can I get there? I could take a bike. I could take the subway. I could take a bus part of the way. I could take a ferry. That's where you start getting your options, but you now have these two clear brackets that you're working within. So if you feel like at any point in this summer you're scanning without a plan, go back to the plant stage and then connect. Okay, related to how I'm most excited to learn and grow and make an impact, who can I talk to? Who's already doing that? What skills would help you bridge the gap from where you are now to what success looks like? And then what are the interesting projects that you could take on? So we'll get to projects in the third stage pilot, but so much of this time may be project based. It may be a little more modular. You may work your way into a role that doesn't exist yet by taking on interesting projects. And I look back, some of my proudest career moments were never on my job title. They were never in my resume. And yet I took these interim projects that I look back and I'm so grateful for, that are some of the proudest things I've done. Laura mentioned in my bio, the launching the global drop-in coaching program at Google that's still in place today. That was one project. My job title, Career Development Program Manager. Who knows what that means? And I had almost left Google at 2.5 years in. I had hit that plateau. I didn't have this language at the time, but I stayed. There was one role open on the career development team, and I took the role. And because of that, I ended up working on this one project that I'm still so proud of today. And I know you all have projects like that already under your belt. So even thinking about project-based purpose in this next window of time, just making the unit that we're looking for, that we're scanning for, a little more manageable. Another thing I want to point out here is that flow state, that those energy strengths, the things that you love, the things that light you up, it's really at this intersection of just enough challenge and just enough skill. So if you have too much chill, too much chill, that's a good one. I'll add that. If you have too much skill and not enough challenge, you'll be bored. But if you have too much challenge and not enough skill to meet that challenge, that's where burnout comes in. So the sweet spot, that flow quadrant where it's just a near ecstatic state of bliss, that's actually where you are challenged and you're growing your skills, but they're not out of balance. So during a time like this, you might actually feel like the challenge level is so high that your anxiety is high. So what skills could help you through this time? And that's why it's so incredible what Laura and Denny and the Georgetown team have put together for the summer, because there is a lot of skill building, really practical nitty gritty sessions like using AI, job interviews, resume, all of it is coming in this summer series, which is awesome. So let's just take 1 minute and jot down as many people as you can. So you've probably already been networking and talking with colleagues. Definitely that counts. Take stock of what you've already done, but even based on what you've written in the plant stage, who do you admire right at this moment? Who are some people that you've just got your eye on? Who has similar strengths and interests to you? Who's doing any aspect of what you identified for your 1 year vision or even end of year midpoint check? Who are some of your friendtors, as I call them, peers, who you motivate and inspire each other? Maybe you have not, it's not required to have a capital M mentor, but who has mentored you in the past? Sometimes I've had mentors where it's just one phone call that changes my life or one powerful question. So who in the past, who have already been these magical friendtors and mentors that you, again, that would be doubling down on a strength of yours, of just the people that you already have in your network, those linchpin people. And then who do you admire? That can be personal or professional. Again, they both have you in common. Take just 30 more seconds and write down a few names here, or even if you don't know the name yet, you might have to ask around. Does anyone know someone who does XYZ or has these qualities or works at this organization? Who would be like three comfort zone names? Like, ah, easy. Oh, yeah, I haven't caught up with that person in a while. Or, oh, I always love talking to so and so. Three comfort zone names. And then I want to challenge you to write down three stretch zone names. Who are three people that, ooh, it's like a little nerve-wracking to ask. The worst they could say is no. That you would be so grateful to get even 15 minutes of their time. Or I like to offer to people just to make it easier for them to say yes. We can even do it asynchronously. Like you can leave me a Voxer, Marco Polo. If you have an iPhone, you can do a voice memo. There's also a service called vocaroo.com. I'll put it in the chat when we get to Q&A. VOC Vocaroo. I'm going to spell it wrong, so I'll put it in the chat. But I even sometimes suggest to somebody I admire, you feel free to leave me a voice memo through Vocaroo and I'll link to the service and say if you don't have time to connect in real time. So I always love giving an asynchronous option. And then there's also going to be people you can learn from afar that you never speak with. So I might admire Oprah's interviewing style. It doesn't mean Oprah is going to get on a networking call with me, but I can listen to her podcasts, interviews. I can see what's working. I often, when I read a book, even a fiction book, I go find the author on 10 different podcasts and I just binge a whole bunch just to learn about that person and how they've approached their works. There's so much richness. I find that Spotify has the best search engine for podcasts. But any topic, any name, any person you can put in, and there's probably a lot of good stuff there. Okay, let's move on to the second part of the scan stage, skills. And I want you to think about what skills would be most beneficial, but also where is your curiosity taking you? This, again, I just want to keep encouraging you, personal or professional. You might not yet know how a personal seeming interest connects professionally, but you would be surprised. It's incredible. Some of the examples that I've seen where someone's pursuing something, like I'll give you an example on the training team. I remember asking one of my direct reports, what's your goal? Like, do you have any goals farther out in your career? And she said, well, really, I want to be a school teacher. And that was such a different answer than someone else on the training team who wanted to do high level curriculum design or wanted themselves to become a chief learning officer at a startup. That's very different than the one who wanted to be a school teacher. So the school teacher one, we worked to make sure she was more in the classroom facilitating versus stuck in spreadsheets or pushing pixels around a PowerPoint slide. When you look at the gap between where you are now and where you'd love to end up, what skills could most help you bridge that gap? And here again, try to do some that are in your comfort zone, easy peasy, and then some that might be more of a stretch. Some of you may be considering the idea of going back to school or getting some degree or doing some program. I even learned here in New York, Neighbors of Columbia University can audit for free. Wish I had known that a long time ago, but I know it now. So there might be these hidden gem opportunities as well for education and skill building. And what would stretch and or delight you? You can even think about what book section of the bookstore you tend to beeline toward. Or if you do subscribe to podcasts, what topics are you most excited when they land in your feed? And some of the scanning is also scanning for problems that need to be solved. So even this, I want to call it a pop-up series. It's so much more than that. But this Pivot with Purpose series, this is solving a problem. This is the team rallying together and creating this whole program to solve this problem of hundreds of thousands of people being impacted all at once and great people at that. So now what? How can we support you? And this whole series, the reason I'm here now is helping solve a problem. So I find that looking for those resonant problems can also be really fruitful. Okay, the last stage before we move into Q&A, pilot. Pilots are small experiments to help you test the waters of a new direction. And what I find is kind of counterintuitive, but you don't solve the pivot first. First, you start piloting, often two or three different things in parallel. I like to think of a metaphor here: racehorses at the Kentucky Derby. You don't know which horse is going to win. You need to actually line up your pilots or horses at the starting gate, lift the gates, and say, go. And they will show you which ones take on a momentum of their own. You will not always know up front. So you might do some job searching related pilots. You might do some education related pilots, going to an info session for a program you're interested in. You might do some uh, consulting related pilots. You might experiment with taking on a client or two. These are all experiments that will help you test 3 E's. Do you enjoy this area? Can you become an expert at it? And is there room to expand? If it's a self-employment thing, is there room to expand? Could you take on more clients? Would that work for you? If it's a contract-based role, you start, you go, do I enjoy this? Do I want to get better at this? And is there room to expand? Could this turn into something bigger? And you won't always know until you start. So, real quick, let's just do 1 minute brainstorm. What are some small experiments you could run in the next month based on what you've written down in the plant and scan stages? And I think they don't have to be big. So a tiny pilot could be scheduling someone for lunch or a walk and talk. Again, it could be attending an info session. Pilots could be volunteering to experiment with different types of roles, shadowing somebody. And then what would be some bigger pilots? What might be, and I'll give you some quiet time. Think of some bigger pilots in the next 3 months that could connect, bridge that gap between your strengths and energizers to that even hazy vision of what success might look like. Okay, we will share some of these in the chat because it's really helpful to get pilot ideas from other people. So it will be very generous of you if you can share in the chat some pilots that you've already run or pilots that you're thinking of running. And while you do that, I'm going to share with you one of my own. So after the pandemic hit and I lost 80% of my projected income in 2020, I was still feeling good. I was still feeling hopeful. I'm like, okay, I wrote the book on pivot. I've got this. And there was that initial, as the research calls it, the surge capacity. I started podcasting every day for the first 3 months of the pandemic, every single day. And I was like, I got this. Okay. And then, of course, anybody could have seen it coming. Life happened. My husband's from Lebanon. There was this huge port explosion. We were so worried for his family. Oh, this whole series, this cascade of things that by the end of the summer, I was like laid out flat. And I thought that that was all going to be the worst of it. I thought if we just get through 2020, it's all going to turn around. I was very optimistic for 2021. And then, okay, things were still kind of shaky in 21. I ended up writing my third book that Laura mentioned called Free Time. That's what Thursday's session is going to be about. And I was still hopeful. I was still really optimistic. Okay, Free Time came out in early 2022, and I thought, oh, my business, speaking gigs, licensing, it hasn't really picked up yet, but surely things will turn around by next year, 2023. And then in 2023, a lot of the biggest tech companies who tended to be my clients declared it the year of austerity, the year of efficiency. And that sick feeling returned. And I will never forget, Google was one of my licensing clients, and they emailed at December, right around Christmas, and said, by the way, is it okay if we only renew for 6 months? Oh, and I just got, oh, I felt sick because I knew what was coming, and nobody would get on the phone with me. No one would speak with me. 6 months later, summer of 2023, someone I don't know, I've never met, schedules the call. Now I know my writing coach calls it the axe. And we talk about the background, her Zoom background, and then she says, I'm just going to cut to the chase. We're ending the contract. And that contract represented 6 figures of income. It was the last big contract that I had standing. And when that happened, even though I could have maybe seen it coming because things have been so wonky, I felt so defeated and I felt scared. I really didn't know now. That wiped off the rest of the projected income. It was like the last thing I was hanging on to. But when that happened, I started writing because it was the only thing I could think to do. I didn't know what else to do. I picked up the artist's way. I started doing morning pages. I started writing every day and writing about my experience. I ended up creating a Substack called Rolling in Dough, DOH with a face palm, that I felt very scared to publish. That was a pilot. And that writing has been a through line now for the last 2 years. And I've done so much reflecting, and I'm now reading craft books and taking classes and hiring writing coach. And it also got me to put myself in the path of pivot. If I didn't have this crisis of confidence and crisis of income and crisis of my own questioning what's next, I did the thing that I advise that I would tell any one of you to do: put yourself in the path of pivot. So I got asked to speak for free at the New York Times later that year. And I said, well, okay, I'll do it again for free. Not ideal. We all have bills to pay. But my dad's going to be in town that day if you wouldn't mind giving us a tour. Um, I know my dad would really love that. He's a 40-year subscriber. I'm a 20-year subscriber. On that tour, we met a man named Jeff Roth, who's been working in the morgue, the archive of the New York Times, for 30 years. 30 years. And he told me he had read Pivot. And when I was in that room that smells like dusty, musty old books, it's windowless. He's super charismatic, trendy. Again, he's been there 30 years. He knows everybody. Um, any like famous writer in New York. Something in that room told me I need to come back here. And so I ended up inviting Jeff to lunch a month later, and I proposed, what if I came in every Tuesday and interviewed you and recorded it? And I just helped document your role, because what if you leave? You take all that 30 years with you. And so now we're still doing this project. When we started the project, AI didn't exist. Then, a year into recording and uploading 30 hours of transcripts, I showed him the way that if you asked a question, I used Google LM, but there's other tools. Um, it answered as if it were him. And that moment brought tears to his eyes. And I still don't know where this project is leading either one of us, but it's volunteer. I'm not getting paid. I kind of invented it or foisted it, depending how you want to see. But it's something that's really bringing me alive. I feel I'm in service to Jeff, this incredible person at the New York Times, Jeff Roth, to the New York Times, even though they barely don't know I exist. I'm just putting myself in the path and seeing where it leads. So at some point, there will be a launch moment. Maybe if you do land a new job or you move to a new city, you get resettled, you answer some of your known variables, even if there are still unknowns. That's where you go all in on a new direction, in a new direction. So to recap, before I just want to make sure we have time for questions. This is a continual process. If and when you get stuck, go back, ask yourself, what's already working? What does success look like? What's out there? What can I try? If you want, I'm happy to send you these slides and the pivot toolkit. We're going to put the resources on the Georgetown website. I'll also put the link to Vocaroo, and I have a pivot AI emissary if you want to ask questions about this process and kind of talk it through. I also do energy strength coaching. So just go to pivotmethod.com/slides. And I want to leave you before opening up to questions with one of my favorite quotes from David White, who's a poet. What you can plan is too small for you to live. What you can plan is too small for you to live. I just love, this gives me comfort that sometimes, even when you can make plans, we don't know. We don't know where life is taking us. I love the Zen parable, we'll see, where I'll send that in the link with the resources. But something that can seem so bad, unequivocally bad, I remind myself, we'll see. We don't know where it's leading. It might unearth parts of yourself that you haven't connected with in years, or since you were a kid, or some new moment. You are all inventing the what's next together. And thank goodness that we all have each other, and you're going to be together through these sessions throughout the summer. which is really exciting because one of my favorite ideas is just I didn't make this up. Caitlin Moran, I think, is one who said it, where when you get to walk through a door, let's say you find that doorway into your next opportunity, you can hold the door open behind you. So hopefully you can all also take comfort in your friend tours in this group where it might be staggered who gets what opportunity when. And who knows, some of you, as a lot of former Googlers have done, start a consulting practice and you bring 5 people with you, even as kind of subcontractors. Doesn't have to be a big fancy employee startup thing. All right, let's get to questions. So, Laura, I'll turn it over to you since I know you've been collecting them.
Yes, and thank you, Jenny. I mean, this presentation has been amazing. All the participants are here. Thank you so much to everyone who
Great.
really was active in the chat. I think it just speaks volumes of what this community is like, that everybody is so willing to share and support each other through this whole process. And really, in the questions that are outstanding, there are two big themes for the questions that are out. One is, um, how do you make that mindset shift from feeling overwhelmed, angry, sad, to finding the positive in the situation and finding a way to move forward? So how do you help out your clients with the mindset shift is question number one.
Yeah. I would give yourself permission. Like, it's okay to feel. How are you not going to feel sad and angry and not just grieving what you lost and how much change how things happened. Grieving for me, I have an article on the Substack. I'll link to it in the resource email. I call it my ghost car. Like, my husband plays this video game and it shows you this ghost car of you before, when how fast you went, and then are you going faster or slower than your ghost car. And when 2023 was when I really had the identity quake, where I just felt like I don't even know who I am anymore. And in my ghost car, it was as if this ghost self was on this turbo career track, but then there was the reality self. And there have been so many different gifts. Susan David wrote a book called Emotional Agility that actually, when times are good, when we're in a period of like high flying success, we're actually not very observant. We're just going, we're along for the ride. And when shit hits the fan, your brain actually shifts into a much more acute, observe it, you're observing, you're noticing, you're yes, you there is grief, but there's also such heightened awareness of everything around you. And I don't know about all of you, I've also found the last few years quite humbling. They've kind of humbled me. I can relate in different ways to people. I speak differently about my own career or anyone else. I have so many friends who are afraid to say out loud how hard. I know a lot of entrepreneurial friends, but also people looking for work. They're afraid to say out loud how hard it's been. And they call me and they're just looking for some comfort. And I always say, you're not alone. So as you process, I would say leave space for all the feelings. And that's where morning pages, even I highly, it would be so cool if a group of you would go through the Artist's Way. It's a 10-week program and you can kind of discuss amongst each other. But if nothing else, the morning pages really helps get it out of your body onto the page. It's 3 pages freehand. I do type mine. Don't tell Julie Cameron. Um, oh, it's like a shower for your mind every day. And you just get the emotion out. And we're going to talk about more on Thursday. I actually think health and fitness needs to be like a top priority. I know it's weird to say that, but I mean, I find you got to give the anxiety a job because otherwise it festers. And for me, that job is moving. Walking, running, dancing, find the thing that brings you alive, but that's actually essential. It's not nice to have anymore.
Okay, the second major question
Sure.
is, how do you balance the dream, right? Of,
Ooh.
if I could do anything, this would it be, or this is the reality, potentially of the market, the way that it is right now, the opportunities that are out there. Yep, that dream versus reality. How do you coach people through that
Yeah.
position?
I would, going back to that pilot idea, can you take one action or one project in the dream bucket and then one in the safety bucket? And or backup bucket. It's almost like we have plan A, B, C, Z. Right now, we're kind of like putting little deposits into each of the buckets because you don't know. And the weird thing, our mind plays tricks on us because sometimes we think, oh, the dream thing isn't possible, so I'll just fall back on this. And sometimes my dad and I joke, like, it would actually be hard to get a job at McDonald's or something where you think, oh, I'll just go work at Starbucks. And that might be really competitive too. You can't, even the thing that you think is your backup, you just don't know. So I would say take small steps in all directions. Don't assume that any one of those paths is harder than any others. And for me, like the volunteer thing I'm doing at the New York Times, that's kind of a dream publication or a publication that I just really respect and has been part of my life for 20 years. So it kind of scratches a part of the dream itch, or writing, publishing essays twice a week. It's not a book, but it's toward a dream, even though they seem like smaller increments of that dream. I'm not saying you should downsize the dream, but just if you're feeling nervous about it, run a few things in parallel.
Perfect. I want to be
Yeah.
cognizant of everybody's time. We are at the top of the hour. Any last comments, Jenny, that you want to make sure that you deliver to this amazing group? And then otherwise I will wrap it up and get us set the stage for our next session.
Sounds great. Well, I just want to say keep going. Someone asked, what is Artist's Way? Yeah, it's a book. It's 30 years. It's been out for 30 years. It's kind of a go-to. I know it sounds weird to say this, and we all come from different sort of spiritual, religious backgrounds, but if you can just hold the faith, like so many times, and I know it's a little esoteric. I recommend it to Laura, one of my favorite books called Outrageous Openness. But I find that when things get this wild, the old linear, even my left brain, it's like it doesn't work anymore. It goes offline. And so you do open up a little bit. You can open up to serendipity and signs and have a little faith. Like ask for a sign. Say, when I go out and about into the world this week, I'm looking for a sign. Here's the question that's on my mind and heart. Please give me a sign. And I've gotten them. It happens. Or you meet the perfect next person. So even when you can't see the progress, it's there, it's happening. You're already doing so much. Don't be hard on yourself. Like, that's the last thing that you need. Take care of yourself and know that even if you're doing a job search, we'll talk on Thursday, a couple hours a week, it's okay. Like, take care of yourself. Use this time to recalibrate. You will figure it out. The only thing is, sometimes our mind thinks it should happen faster than the reality will so. So sometimes you got to just tell your mind, I know you think it should have happened already, but but you've got this. Like I believe in you. I believe in all of you so much. So um hold the faith. That's really what I would say.
Well, thank you so much for that incredibly positive
Mm.
perspective and reminder of what we all need to be focusing on.
And I've
Every
seen it work. I've seen it happen. So just know, like, even when you can't see it, your friends and family know you are going to land on your feet. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, back over to
100%,
you, Laura.
100%. No, it's really true. And this group of all groups is an incredibly resilient, problem-solving, mission-driven group. There is no question in my mind that everybody is going to land on their feet. Maybe not the way that we anticipated. There might be a little flip in there somewhere. But
Absolutely.
yes. And so our next session, everybody, Thursday, same time, same place, or a different Zoom link probably, 12 o'clock Eastern time. We're going to have Jenny back again for part 2 to talk about the structure that she describes in her book Free Time, which I know is kind of an ironic title for this group, but it's more about how to use your time in a
Yeah.
strategic way to move yourself forward and to move yourself towards creating new things for yourself. So please join us on Thursday. Keep the questions coming in the chat and in the Q&A, because if there isn't anything that we have answered today, we will do our best to follow up and to make sure that you get all the resources that you need. We are still, very much in the launch phase of this great initiative, and we are absolutely open to hearing anything that you all have to say or any additional needs that we might help meet. So please come back on Thursday, spread the word, let everybody know how incredible Jenny is, and that they have the opportunity to either watch this recording and to come to the session on Thursday. With that, thank you all. Jenny, have an amazing rest of your day.
Thank
See
you,
you on
everybody.
Thursday.
Thanks for being here. See you soon. Bye.